9-year-old Tiara sat silently in her room, tears streaming down her face, clutching her teddy bear like it was her only friend. She wanted to tell someone, anyone, the secret that was destroying her, but fear kept her silent. In a bustling city of Lagos lived a young, vibrant couple who loved each other very well. For 5 long years, Ade and Tola had been married, but their home felt incomplete. They desperately wanted a child, but no matter what they tried, nothing worked. They visited doctors, underwent tests, and prayed endlessly, yet every medical report said the same thing. There was nothing wrong with either of them. Their faith never wavered. Together, they fasted, sought counseling, and poured their hearts out in prayer, hoping for a miracle. One morning, everything changed. Tola had an early meeting at work and left in a hurry. In her rush, she forgot to put away a small container she had left on the bedside table. Ade woke up shortly after she left and began his usual morning routine. As he made the bed, his eyes fell on the shiny container. Curious, he picked it up and opened it. Inside were contraceptive pills. For a moment, Ade didn't understand what he was looking at. He froze, staring at the container in disbelief. Slowly, realization dawned on him, and his hands began to tremble. Tola has been taking contraceptives? He sank onto the bed, his mind racing. How could she? For 5 years, they had been trying for a child. She had cried with him, prayed with him, and gone to every doctor's appointment. How could she betray him like this? The pain in his chest was unbearable. He tried to calm himself, but the betrayal was too much. He couldn't bring himself to leave the house. That day, Ade canceled all his business meetings and sat in silence, replaying every moment of the past 5 years. When Tola returned home later that evening, she found him sitting in the living room, his face dark and unreadable. "You're back early," she said, smiling as she placed her bag on the table. Ade didn't respond. Instead, he stood up and handed her the container. "Can you explain this?" he asked, his voice calm but cold. Tola's smile disappeared. Her eyes widened in shock as she looked at the container. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. "I said, can you explain this?" Ade repeated, his tone rising slightly. Tola stammered, I can explain." "Explain what?" "That you've been taking contraceptives all these years while pretending to try for a baby with me? That you've been lying to me, deceiving me, and wasting my time." His voice cracked with anger and pain. Tears welled up in her eyes as she finally confessed. "I wasn't ready," she whispered. "I needed time. I wanted to become a manager at work before having a child. I thought a baby would slow me down." Ade couldn't believe what he was hearing. He felt hurt, betrayed, and furious. How could the woman he loved and trusted do this to him? But deep down, Tola knew she had made a mistake. She begged for his forgiveness and promised to make things right. It wasn't easy, but over time, they worked through their pain and resentment. They rebuilt their trust and rekindled their love. This time, Tola got rid of all the contraceptives and committed fully to starting a family. Months later, she gave Ade the news he had been longing to hear. She was pregnant. The day their baby girl was born, it was as if all the sadness and disappointment of the past disappeared. Their home was now filled with laughter, joy, and love like never before. And as Ade held his daughter in his arms, he looked at Tola with gratitude, knowing they had finally found their miracle. Ade and Tola's lives had transformed in ways they never imagined. Their businesses were thriving, and they were enjoying the fruits of their hard work. Ade had recently acquired a massive new office space for his expanding business, while Tola finally achieved her dream of becoming a manager. They were the perfect picture of success, but their busy schedules came with a heavy price. Their daughter, Tiara, now 9 years old, often felt the weight of their absence. She was left with nannies and sometimes went to school late because no one had time to get her ready in the mornings. Her once bright academic performance began to fade, and she started struggling in school. One day, the head of Tiara's school requested an urgent meeting with her parents. Ade and Tola arrived, somewhat perplexed, and sat across from the school head, who wasted no time. Mr. and Mrs. Ade, we've noticed Tiara's performance has been declining rapidly. She is late to school almost every day, and it's beginning to affect her overall learning and participation in class, the headmaster said, his tone serious. Ade frowned, confused. Yes, we know she's late sometimes, but we didn't realize it was this bad. What do we do to help her? The headmaster sighed and glanced at Tiara's homeroom teacher, who had joined the meeting. We suggest hiring a private tutor who can provide extra lessons after school. It would also give Tiara some stability while you both manage your busy schedules. The teacher chimed in. We have an excellent tutor, Mr. Jide, who's highly recommended. He's helped many children improve their academics, and I'm confident he can help Tiara as well. The tutor, Mr. Jide, began working with Tiara after school. At first, things seemed to be improving. He was punctual, patient, and Tiara appeared to be catching up on her studies. Since Ade and Tola often returned home late at night, they allowed Mr. Jide to stay at their house until they got back. But things started to change one afternoon. Tiara was alone at home when Mr. Jide arrived for their lesson. As he walked in, his demeanor was different, unusual. He smiled at her in a way that made her uncomfortable. She shrugged it off, thinking she was imagining things. But as they sat down for her lesson, he leaned closer than usual, brushing her hair and saying, Tiara, you're such a beautiful girl. Tiara froze, unsure how to respond. Her heart raced, but she stayed silent, hoping the moment would pass. But it didn't. Suddenly, Mr. Jide demanded, Come sit on my lap. Tiara's eyes widened with fear. No, sir, she whispered, stepping back. His face darkened, and before she could react, he slapped her hard across the face. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she clutched her burning cheek. He glared at her and said in a low, threatening voice, Do as I say, or you'll regret it. Terrified and alone, Tiara felt trapped. There was no one to help her. Slowly, she did as he asked, and what followed was a nightmare she couldn't escape. He forced himself on her, ignoring her cries of pain and pleas for him to stop. When it was over, she curled up in a corner, sobbing uncontrollably. Before he left, he leaned in close and hissed, If you ever tell anyone about this, I'll kill you. Do you hear me? Tiara nodded, too scared to speak. From that day, her life became a living hell. The abuse continued. Day after day, week after week, Mr. Jide found ways to isolate her and repeat his horrific acts. Tiara became withdrawn and anxious. She stopped smiling, stopped playing, and even began losing interest in her studies. Her parents noticed the change, but assumed it was because of their absence. Whenever Tiara tried to muster the courage to talk to her mother, Tola would wave her off, saying, Tiara, I'm too tired right now. Can we talk later? Later never came. One evening, Tiara sat alone in her room, clutching her teddy bear and crying softly. She couldn't take it anymore. She wanted to tell someone, anyone, what was happening. But the fear of Mr. Jide's threats kept her silent. The next day at school, her teacher noticed Tiara's pale face and tired eyes. She gently pulled her aside and asked, Tiara, is everything okay at home? You don't seem like yourself lately. Tiara hesitated, tears welling up in her eyes. She wanted to speak but couldn't find the words. The teacher knelt down and placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. You can trust me, Tiara. Whatever it is, I'm here to help you. For the first time, Tiara felt a glimmer of hope. She whispered, It's Mr. Jide. The school immediately took action. They reported the matter to the authorities and informed Ade and Tola, who were devastated by the news. Tola broke down in tears, blaming herself for not listening to her daughter sooner. Ade, consumed with guilt and anger, vowed to make things right. Mr. Jide was arrested and faced justice for his actions. Tiara was enrolled in therapy to help her heal from the trauma. Her parents also made significant changes to their lives. They scaled back their work commitments and prioritized spending time with their daughter. Over time, Tiara began to smile again. Her parents' renewed attention and love gave her the strength to heal. Ade and Tola learned a painful but important lesson. Success means nothing if your family is falling apart. Their story became a wake-up call, not just for them, but for others as well. It was a painful reminder that success, money, and a good home mean nothing if your child is silently suffering. How often do we, as parents, say, "Not now, I'm busy," or "We'll talk later"? How often do we assume that just providing for our children is enough? We work tirelessly to give them the best, good schools, a comfortable home, and a future full of opportunities. But in doing so, are we unknowingly leaving them unprotected? Tiara's parents loved her. They wanted nothing but the best for her. But they were too busy. Too busy to see the fear in her eyes. Too distracted to notice how their once happy daughter had become withdrawn and silent. Too late to realize that the person they trusted had turned their little girl's life into a nightmare. This is not just their story, it's a warning to all of us. Being present in your child's life is not just about paying school fees or providing luxury. It's about truly seeing them, listening to them, and making sure they feel safe. Because sometimes the monster isn't in the dark. Sometimes it's the one we invite into our homes, the one we trust the most. Please, don't wait for tragedy before you start paying attention. Don't assume that later will always come. Your child needs you now. Look into their eyes, listen to their words, notice the small changes, and never be too busy to hear their cry for help. Because the greatest gift you can give your child isn't wealth or success. It's your presence, your love, and your protection that can give.